can your mainframe IT operations benefit from smarter analytics? Of all the systems in your data center, z/OS produces the most detailed performance and configuration data in the form of RMF and SMF. But most sites still use a 4 decades old process that generates hundreds of static reports, requiring cumbersome manual interpretation by deep experts. Consequently, the data is not used to predict and prevent upcoming performance problems, resolve incidents as they occur, or to spot ways to reduce peaks and costs. So modernize your approach to RMF and SMF and realize its full value. IntelliMagic applies artificial intelligence techniques to deliver the best actionable insights for performance, availability, and software cost reduction. Experience the power of evolving the questions you can make your data answer beyond just what went wrong to what is going wrong right now, and even what is about to go wrong and how can I prevent this? Learn more at IntelliMagic.com.
What? What?
This is Jeopardy!
And please welcome your host, Richard Label.
Come on, keep going. I'm not up here yet. Hoopla! Hooah! All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at day 2 of SHARE. Whether you're watching us live or at home on SHARE Live, we got an exciting presentation for you today. We're going to have some fun. And a little later on, some great focus on mainframe security. But first, we're going to play SHARE Jeopardy. Hi, contestants. How are you?
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to have you here. First of all, we have IBM Z champion Dusty Rivers. He's a grandfather of 6, a 9-time IBM champion, and was very excited that Alabama won this year.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, that's right. Somebody said you just had a grandchild recently.
Yes, a new baby girl.
Oh, congratulations.
That's awesome.
Can you name all 6 grandchildren?
Yes. Oh, you?
No, you don't have to. Yes is probably fine. All right, in the middle, IBM Z champion Susan Rice once worked cleaning body shops, her worst job she ever had, and it took her 20 years to finish college because she paid for the whole thing herself. Congratulations. All right.
All right. Good job.
So the body shop, that helped pay for school, basically?
Yeah, a little bit. Not much, though.
It was just a lot of grease and oil and parts
and primer dust and
drunk mechanics and that whole thing, just cleaning them all up. All right. And finally, we have a SHARE board member, Justin Baston. He's the father of 2, and he's actually one of identical triplets. Ooh. He's the what? He's the pretty one? Okay, Martha, you want to run this? And somebody says you do Iron Man. Now, does that mean the big races, or you dress up like Iron Man?
The latter. The latter. No, I try to do the big races. Try is the key word.
All right. So I see we have Dusty, Susan. What's the deal with your name tag?
You know, I got to pay respect. Put in binary.
Oh, you did it in binary. I love nerd humor. All right.
You tell me.
We have to be out of the room at 9:30. Could you please shut up, all right? I want to thank all of you for being here. Quick refresher on the rules. First contestant will pick a category and a point value. Our categories today are Sunny and Share. That's Share Trivia. Second category, Sacramento. That's Sacramento trivia. And finally, Hacking Cough. That's some mainframe security trivia. We'll show you the answer behind the dollar value. The first person to give the correct answer in the form of a question, so you have to put it in the form of a question, wins that dollar value and has the opportunity to pick the next category and point value. We're going to continue that way until everything's been selected, or I get bored, and we'll move on to Final Jeopardy. At the end of the game, person with the most points wins the first place prize right down there, a plethora of trade show crap kind of stuff. All right? So I decided backstage that I like Susan the most. Susan, give me a category and an amount.
Sonny and Cher for 100.
Sonny and Cher for 100. The answer is the operating system that sounds like the blanket-carrying friend of Charlie Brown's. Oh, we don't have buzzers. We don't have buzzers, we have these clappers. Can you give the clappers a try there? Hoopla! Hoopla! Please don't do it every time they come in. All right, you were first. Justin, what's the answer?
What is ZVSE?
Sorry, that's wrong. Anybody else want to ring in?
Oh, they get the answer.
What is Linux? Sounds like Charlie Brown's friend Linus. All right.
It was clearly.
All right, Susan, you still have control of the board.
Sonny and Cher for 200.
Sonny and Cher for 200. The year Cher began as the first ever enterprise IT user group.
Oh, God.
Yes, Justin.
What is 1955?
And the answer is, it was 1955. Nice. 200 points. Don't break that. We need those. All right. Pick a category and amount.
Okay, I'm going to go with Hacking Cough for 200.
Hacking Cough for 200. The company lost half of all of Americans' Social Security numbers to a breach. Yes, Susan.
What is Equifax? Or who is Equifax?
Who is Equifax?
All right. Good job.
I kind of like what is Equifax, actually. You have control of the board, and you won 200 there.
Hacking Cough for 100.
Hacking Cough for 100. A malware that extorts you to get back your data. Yes.
What is ransomware?
What is ransomware? Nice job.
Nice, Dusty.
All our players on the board. All right, Dusty, you have control.
Frightening.
I feel like we've been doing this for an hour. All right.
Hacking Cough for 300.
Hacking Cough for 300. A pop singer with the #1 InfoSec Twitter account. Very famous pop singer.
Good Lord.
Yes.
Who's James Vincent?
Very close. Who's Taylor Swift? Often get confused. They often get confused. All right. Dusty, you have control of the board.
Hacking Cough for 400.
Hacking Cough for 400. The world's largest gathering of hackers in the world. Yes, Susan.
What is DEF CON?
Yep.
I believe it is. Either DEF CON or Black Hat. Nice job. You have control of the board, Susan. And you got a nice smattering of applause. That was good.
What Hacking Cough for 500?
Hacking Cough for 500. Please feel free to play at home. This is the type of terminal used to access mainframes in Roman numerals. Take a shot at it. Take a shot at it.
What is 3270?
Roman numerals?
No. Oh. That was before my generation.
All right. The answer is MMMCCLXX. Why it was worth 500 points. All right? All right. Susan, you still have control of the board.
Sonny and Cher for 300.
Sonny and Cher for 300. To be an independent volunteer-run information technology association that provides education, professional networking, and industry influence. Yes, Dusty.
What is the SHARE mission statement?
Nice job, yes. 300 points.
Good job.
Nailed that one. Good, you got control of the board.
Sonny and Cher for 400.
Sonny and Cher for 400. This is a user-driven community of over 1,000 members. I'm going to go with Dusty because you wouldn't stop doing that.
What is Z Next Gen?
What is Z Next Gen? Yes, nice job.
Negative 700. How do I get negative 700? Jesus.
Sonny and Cher for 500.
To finish off that category. It's the name of Cher's blog.
I'm going to say, that's pretty bad, especially being on the board.
You're getting heckled. That's horrible.
I know it's
The answer is, the question is, what is Mindshare?
We need to work
Mindshare.
on that.
Yes.
We need to work on
Justin just lost his seat on the board. All right. I'm not sure who has control of the board. I've lost myself. Sacramento for 100. I'll do it. You don't have to be royalty to enjoy this basketball. Yes, Dusty.
Who are the Sacramento Kings?
Correct. Who are the Sacramento
that.
Kings?
All right.
I'm gonna,
Working our way down the aisle. Sacramento for 200. Sacramento was home to him long before he thought about writing about Finn and... Yes, Dusty.
I forgot.
Yes, Susan. Susan.
Mark Twain. Who is Mark Twain?
Who is Mark Twain? Nice job. Good job. Got excited, though, didn't you? It's fun. I know. Sacramento for 300. A service that originated in Sacramento back in 1860 and stretched as far east as Missouri. Yes, Dusty with a
What is
lame...
the Pony Express?
It was the Pony Express.
Hey. How do you know that?
You barely chimed in on that one. All right, Sacramento for 400. The former governor of California, who is also the current governor. Yes, Dusty.
Who is Jerry Brown?
Who is Jerry Brown? Nice job. And our final question here on this one, 500. A local company processes 12 million pounds of these every day during harvest. Largest producer of this nut.
Oh,
Yes,
almond.
Justin.
What is almonds?
What is almonds? Blue Diamond is the company. Blue Diamond. All right, we tally up. Let's give him a nice hand.
That's still negative.
Do we have their scores up there? Did anybody happen to do that?
It was over there.
Are they up there?
They were.
They were?
We could just imagine.
There we go. Ooh.
Negative 5.
I'm going to let Justin borrow $20 so he's still in. All right, there you go. Yeah, you're welcome. Sure. So put Justin up to $15, will you? Perfect. Well, we'll just know you have up to 15 to bet, okay? Hopefully you win that back and get me my money, all right? And somebody had 1,000, and I think Susan had 800. All right, so you can bet a little bit, all of it. You want to kind of gamble, whatever you want to do there. Here's your final Jeopardy question. Final Jeopardy. It's the name of the game in the movie War Games that Matthew Broderick thinks he's playing on a supercomputer. While they're writing down their answers, I'd like everybody to help me say, no, hey, no cheat. No, what are you doing?
We're SHARE volunteers. We work together, baby.
All right, not this time, all right? Nice one. All right, ready? Name of the game, movie Star Wars, Matthew Broderick thinks he's playing. Everybody join me, will you? Na, 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 na. Give yourselves a nice hand. That was lovely, lovely. Do you have them? Do you have them up there?
Yeah.
All right. I forget how the game goes. Do we look first
Lowe's
at the
first.
answer? Okay. What did you? So you're in last place with $15.
I put up $14.99.
You thought the name of the game was
No,
$14.99?
that's what I bet.
Oh, you bet
What do you want? You
$14.99.
wanna know?
That's right. I should probably have watched the show before I did this.
And my answer.
And your answer is?
Nuclear war game. No.
No.
I thought it was nuclear.
No,
Okay.
that's not right. Yes, Susan, with 800, you bet how much?
800.
Oh, you went for all of it. I love that.
What is thermonuclear war?
So close. So close. Dusty, did you get it?
No.
How
I said tic-tac-toe. 800.
800. So you ended up with 200. Susan, you're at zip, and Justin had a penny and still owes me 20 bucks. All right. So we have a lovely gift for you, Dusty, right there. If you don't like anything in there, give it to these guys. How about a nice hand for all of our players?
Hey, good job, guys.
Excellent job, you guys. Thank you.
Good job.
There you go. You can go up. Thanks. Da, 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 da. Excellent. All right. Shouldn't be that much fun. All right. Let's go on. I have a couple quick things to tell you guys before we bring out our guest speakers today. Since we've been on the topic of security, we're going to hand it over to our keynotes who are going to explain mainframe security because they're experts. Throughout the session, you can submit and vote on or like any questions in real time. At the end of the presentation, our speakers will have time to answer as many of those questions as we can in the remaining time for the morning. We'll collect all the rest of the answers that you submitted, and we will put those up on the SHARE website for you after the event. Quick reminder how the Q&A tool works. Hi, guys. Yeah, you can come up and grab those. Thank you. Open the SHARE Sacramento event app on your smartphone, and you can click on Keynote Q&A widget. If you're not able to access the mobile app, you go to share.cnf.io. All right, go to either one of those, pick today's keynote presentation, and then you simply click on the Ask button, type your question in, and select who you'd like to address your question. It can be one of the two gentlemen, or if you don't want to do that, it can just be an open question for both of them. So it is, I want to make sure I have it since I'm going to be running this, share.cnf.io, or you can go up onto the SHARE app and find it under the keynote speakers. You can also see and upvote other questions. So if you see a question on there, oh, that's a really good question, you can like that. And the more likes a question gets, it moves up in the queue for us to ask them. All right? So I think that's it. Thanks, guys. Without any further ado, I'm going to bring up today's speakers, but let me give them a quick intro first. First is Chad Rikansrud. He's the Director of North American Operations for RSM Partners. He's a nationally recognized security industry speaker, and he's had appearances at DEF CON, RSA 2017, SHARE, and many other regional conferences. Most of his 20-year career has been technology leadership for the financial services industry. He's held various senior leadership positions, worldwide data center operations, infrastructure recovery responsibility, as well as enterprise-wide System Z storage. He's going to be joined by Philip Young, leader in legacy system security research. Since 2013, he's released tools to aid in the testing of mainframe security and contributed to both the Nmap and Metasploit projects. I think I got that right, yeah? Metasploit, nice. He's also spoken at multiple conferences around the world on mainframe security, hacking, DEF CON, Black Hat, GSE, Vanguard, also been here at SHARE before. In addition to speaking, he's built mainframe security programs for multiple Fortune 100 companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chad Rikansrud and Phil Young. Let's give them a nice hand. Woo! I got all the words. Yeah, very proud of myself. Thanks.
By the
yeah,
way,
no, right back at
Alex
you.
should be worried. All right, do you want your notes here?
I will.
Yeah, you're going to grab that? Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. It's not like I wrote them myself. So I want to thank the Jeopardy people. I put together those questions to try to trick you up in security, so I'm really impressed you got all the questions, mostly. Before we go on, so a little secret. I'm not here. This has to go in every talk of mine, by the way. So I'm not here representing my employer. I'm here to speak on behalf of myself. I'm not here representing them. They don't sponsor this. So if you look me up later, in fact, my badge doesn't even have the company I work for. You can figure it out. Please don't yell it out if you know it. But I'm not here representing them. I'm just here representing myself. I'm not going to spend too much time on introducing myself. We already talked about this. But anybody remember like X25 networks? This is probably yes. Thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Some claps. Wow. It's funny because I ask that question in like hacker conferences and I get like, no. And then I mention like SprintNet. I'm like, oh, my dad used that. So, yeah. So, but that's how I sort of got my feet wet into hacking, right? So, I watched that movie, the War Games, right? It was a seminal movie in my hacking career. But it really started when I read this document about hacking DataPack. Anybody know what DataPack was? Yeah, good. I hear some people. Good. That's a Canadian X25 network, and that's sort of how I got my start. I got a computer with a modem and so on and so forth. Didn't really start, I mean, I probably was hacking mainframes, but I didn't really start mainframe security research until about 2012. That's when I realized that a lot of companies, like in my sphere, so in my area, like going to conferences and stuff, I wasn't hearing about the platform, despite the company that I worked at relying on the platform fairly heavily. And then I gave some of my talks at DEF CON and Black Hat and so on to sort of raise awareness about this platform in those circles.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it. I'm honored and delighted to be up here and having been asked to do this. So I'm Chad Rikansrud. I'm currently the director for North American operations for RSM Partners. And basically that means I get to hack mainframes for a living now. So I'm just living the dream. I don't get paid for this job at all. I just do it because I love it. I spent 20 years prior to this in the financial services industry. And what you need to know about that is that's where I learned how important these platforms are. So I ran global data center operations, which means when I got called at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were already in the ditch. The ATMs were down, the point of sales were down. We didn't know what to do. We had IRLM locking. The system was needing to be reset and IPL'd. And this is where I learned exactly just how important that this platform is to banks, insurance companies, governments, healthcare, you name it. When I'm not doing this, I enjoy anything with a motor that goes fast, so I currently cannot get life insurance anymore. But ultimately, why I'm here and how I started on this journey was basically to just, under the tenet of proving out that the mainframe, while systemically important and having a lot of really cool technology bits about it, is just another computer. And if we start changing our mindset a little bit to thinking about the mainframe as just another computer, then maybe we can improve the security posture of it. So Phil and I started down this journey, and we realized when we were putting together this talk that the journey hasn't just been creating all these cool tools and all this stuff and giving talks about it, but really, and where we came up with the title for the talk, we didn't realize how much social change, how much propaganda, how much politics there was in trying to move the needle on improving mainframe security. So when we're talking about this throughout the course of this keynote, we're going to talk a little bit about how we got here. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of cybersecurity today and how it has way outpaced the mainframe in terms of its ability to be resilient and nimble. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do about it. So thanks for listening.
So Chad and I started giving a whole bunch of talks together. That's sort of we've given a bunch of co-talks at this point.
Yeah, last year we did SHARE in San Jose. Was anybody there at that San Jose and SHARE?
Yeah.
So we did a talk there where we say, how can you take testing of your mainframe, pen testing your mainframe, and integrate that into your red team, into your pen testers back in your environment?
So then we gave a talk at RSA. Anybody been to RSA? Wow, no one? Wow. Okay.
I'm surprised by that because we had. I mean, I know this room holds 600 people.
Yeah.
It's not full, but there's a couple hundred people. Now, how many people do you think were at that talk?
I mean, I was keeping track. I think we peaked at 17 people.
Does that include you and me?
Yeah. Actually, yes.
And the video guy and the guy watching the door.
Yeah,
and
my friend who showed up late. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So we had 9 people in there at that talk.
Yeah. But
in
I mean,
a room
okay,
this
so
size.
We did literally have 17 people, but the point was we are talking in front of an audience of thought leaders in cybersecurity, right? And the video went up on YouTube and had more views in the first hour than people that were in the room, right? So that's fine, yeah. So, and we also spoke at DEF CON. So you heard like the largest gathering of hackers in the world, right, is DEF CON. So we spoke at DEF CON, and it was sort of like almost 2 separate talks where I spoke about network hacking, so hacking NJE, hacking TN3270, and those kind of things.
And I set out to, in keeping the mainframe as just another computer, I wanted to level the playing field. So those of you in the security world who study, who've been around, understand like exploits and vulnerabilities and malware, sort of the granddaddy of these that came along with the primarily assembler and the C coding languages, the buffer overflow. And so I basically just set out this simple tenet, like, can I do this on the mainframe? Can I write a vulnerable program? Can I do a buffer overflow, get code execution, all this stuff that I would consider kind of ground level stuff in exploiting other systems. Did it work on the mainframe? And of course, lo and behold, it actually did. So that was our sort of first talk. Well, it was kind of our first talk. We actually, I'm going to take you back in time just a little bit, because I do get asked every now and then, how did you guys end up doing this? Because Phil lives out here on the West Coast. I live up in the frigid North. And how did we end up doing this? So I had, back when I was working at the bank, I had one of those moments that you hear about where people sit up in the middle of the night and go, holy crap. And at the time, I went from running data center operations to running all the infrastructure. So I was responsible for the data replication, the ability to recover these mainframes that do thousands and thousands of transactions per second for this billions and billions of dollar huge company, global company. And but as a side hobby, because I'm a nerd at heart, I can own that, I was looking into malware and how does malware work and what are the bad guys doing and finding all this really sophisticated software and all these really cool vulnerabilities that they were finding in all this Linux and Windows and other web software. And I sat up in the middle of the night and I thought to myself, who is doing this research on the mainframe? We've got this systemically important platform that's everywhere, the lack of which causes immediate pain and suffering to anybody who uses that company's products and people who don't even know who that company is. And yet there isn't this sort of like culture of people who want to just poke at it and prod at it and fix it and make it better outside of those who actually develop the software for it. So I started Googling, and I kept coming up with this name, Phil Young. There were a couple of other names, but I was looking at mainframe hacking and who had been out to like the DEF CONs and some of these places. Is anybody talking about this? Surely there must be a body of work. And I got to tell you, so I didn't grow up with the internet. I kind of grew into the internet. Right? I'm old enough where we didn't have the internet when I was growing up, but I'm absolutely immersed in it now. But there is a special sort of challenge when you're going to send a serious email to somebody who you've only met on the internet, and you want them to take you seriously. I'm not too creepy, not too forward, don't want to give out too much information because this guy's talking about hacking stuff, right? So I took probably the most time I've ever taken to compose an email, which Phil found for this presentation, and sent it off to him and said, and it was just a little bit like being back in 6th grade, like, do you like me? Check yes or no. Would you like to meet up and talk about mainframe hacking? And Phil responded, and if you know Phil at all, I mean, he responded vociferously with all kinds of excitement about it and started talking about what we could do and this and that. And he said, are you going to be in Vegas for DEF CON B-Sides, which was just a few months after this? And I said, yeah, I'm going to be there. Fine. He's like, I'm giving a talk at B-Sides Las Vegas, which is before DEF CON. Come find me at my talk and we'll chat. So I did. I went and found Phil, went in his talk, and I sat in the audience, and I was participating so much, it ended up being a talk between me and Phil, and then this happened.
Yeah. So literally had met Chad in person maybe 30 minutes before this, right? This is not a planned thing, but I invited him up on stage with me because he was so passionate. You can't see it. I mean, you can probably see it when he was doing here. But what he's doing is he's yelling at the audience, telling them that they don't get it, and they don't get how important this platform is to everyone in the room, right? That was his purpose. He came up. He was actually doing that in the audience, and I was just like, just come up here and get behind a mic.
Just testify, Brother Chad.
Yeah,
Bring it up
just
here.
tell them. But if you know anything about Chad, he's the only one. So look, like he was saying, I was by myself doing this kind of research, right? My philosophy is if no one's going to step up, then guess what? You're stepping up. And he was the only one. People would reach out to me. That's not the first email I got. But I would reply and say, hey, that's great. Thanks for the interest. Here's what you need to do, and then we'll talk. And Chad was the only one who did everything that I asked him to do. I even remember an email where he sent me, he's like, do I really need to do this? I'm like, yep, you got to do it. So, but he's also one of the only people who has helped me to build new stuff. We get asked a lot of times like, hey, when are you going to look into X? Or when are you guys going to provide Y? Are you going to talk at, we get invited to conferences to speak. And one of the things we kept getting asked about was, are you going to give a training? So last year, Chad and I got together. We started doing a mainframe penetration testing training. And I'm not up here to talk, I'm not up here to sell the class. Like, that's not, we don't really need to do that. But I'm telling you this because we did it because we were asked to do it because no one else was doing it. There was no one else talking about mainframe penetration testing. So we have to be the ones to go up there. I'm sure there are people who know the platform better than we do. In fact, people in our class will tell us that's not how RACF works, and that's fine. But we are the ones up there teaching the class because no one else stepped up. We're also the ones who are developing the tools that are used by other hackers. So we've worked on developing tools. So that's a tool, that's a screenshot from a tool that will do a man-in-the-middle TN3270 connection. So I set it up, I email your staff and say, hey, we're on a new IP address, and now I have everyone's logins as they log into the mainframe for the day. The purpose of these tools is to show that, A, it's possible, but also because they didn't exist. So here's another example. These are two tools that I wrote for Nmap. Nmap is a tool that comes with Kali Linux. It comes with Linux, right? So it's available. Everyone uses it. I developed these tools specifically because I wanted the penetration testing capabilities of the mainframe to go to the people who were using these tools. And I wanted it to be simple. So on the left, you can see I'm brute forcing TSO user IDs, and on the right, I am brute forcing Kix transaction IDs. Right? These are two tools. They work really well, and now people have actually started to use them in the wild.
In keeping in that same, I think we backed up one here. In keeping with that same line, one of the tools that is often used by, can't get to that one slide. Huh. All right. Anyway, one of the tools that's often used by all kinds of penetration testing teams is a tool called Metasploit. Metasploit is really just a collection of a bunch of different modules. The modules might be exploits, payloads, different types of enumeration modules. And when I started looking into it and said, look, what we're trying to do here is kind of bring the mainframe to the people. It's very difficult to bring people onto the mainframe for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about some of them later. But we can bring it to the people by basically saying, look, we know you use these tools, we've used these tools. If we define some things you can do in the mainframe to start giving you a way into testing this platform, we'll do it. So we defined it to Metasploit, added the Z architecture to it, and then started basically just ticking off the list of things that you would see in other platforms, right? Buffer overflows, SMPE, supply chain attacks. Anybody heard of like supply chain attacks when it comes to software? Right, so supply chain attacks, meaning that I'm going to plant a bug or malware or something a little further up the chain so that by the time that patch or that software gets to you, you're already installing it, right? All of these things are possible, and instead of just getting up and talking about it, I built demonstrations on some of these, including malware on the mainframe or ransomware, which is affectionately referred to as the talk where I could have sold hugs afterwards. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second later on.
And so, does anybody know what Shodan is? Shodan, yeah? Like I see, like, yeah, well, Mark Wilson does. But anybody else know what Shodan is? No? Okay, so Shodan is a tool that goes out and finds systems on the internet and takes like screenshots and all that kind of stuff. But guess what it didn't support? It didn't support the mainframe. So I wrote a tool to add mainframe support to Shodan, and they're working on it. But it also runs on a separate website called the IMP, which is the Internet Mainframe Project, so we can find internet-facing mainframes, right? And I don't do that to like name and shame. I do that because I think it's cool, but also because they're just there. And I was always told, oh, our mainframe's safe, it's not on the internet. And now I can say, are you sure? What company do you work for? Maybe I have it in this database, right? So the idea is there's a lot of misconceptions about the security on the platform because stuff just wasn't done before, right? This isn't possible, just because someone didn't do it. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the current state of cybersecurity, right? So, and as it relates to the mainframe.
We also want to get the point across in this that the cybersecurity as an evolution in Linux, in Windows, in networking devices, whatever, is outpacing in terms of its ability to react to the different threat scenarios in the world. There's a number of reasons that is happening, and we're going to go through some of those. We're going to start out by talking about bug bounties.
Yeah, so who here knows what a bug bounty is? I like audience participation if you can't tell. So one hand, let's see. A couple,
Two, three.
like maybe a half dozen hands. If you know what a bug bounty is, how many of you or your corporation are part of a bug bounty program? I got to look because there's like no hands up. Okay, so there's no hands. All right. That's kind of not shocking. As I was rehearsing this talk earlier, I was like, what if all the hands go up? And we're like, no, that's probably not going to happen. So a bug bounty program is essentially you sign up for BugCrowd or HackerOne. Those are the two main vendors in the space. And you say, hackers of the world, you have free reign to hack our systems, but you have to tell us about what you find. And we will pay you money for what you have found. Right? So the idea is hackers are going to hack. Right? That's what they're going to do. That's what we do. But if they're going to do that, you might as well give them a way to get money for their time and effort. And so these programs evolved over time. Ooh, there we go. So these programs evolved over time. So I think sort of started with Microsoft, but now there's thousands of companies that are enrolled in either HackerOne or BugCrowd that lets you go in, try to break into their environment. So this is my favorite story. So MasterCard, right? Who here uses MasterCard? Like lots of people. All right. So anybody use their like one-click, one-pay solution where you just like log in, you click once, and you can pay, right? It's obviously very popular. So on that platform, the way it was sending transactions back and forth, you could actually modify the amount of money that you were going to get charged, but it didn't change how much the vendor was going to make. And so MasterCard would have to eat like a $500 TV transaction because you paid $500 for the TV, but you paid $1 gets charged to your credit card. A hacker found that and issued the bug to MasterCard, and MasterCard paid him $100,000 for finding that bug. And that's much cheaper than some nefarious organizations getting a hold of that and stealing millions of dollars worth of stuff from MasterCard. Right? That's the mentality of a bug bounty program, is you're paying other people to do that work. This is the DoD, the Department of Defense. This was kind of a huge win for HackerOne. HackerOne convinced the Department of Defense that you should join our program, and anything that's internet-facing that's owned by the Department of Defense will be in scope. Anything with a .mil is in scope for this bug bounty program. And it's a win because, let's be real, hackers were already going after the platform. And if they found vulnerabilities, they'll just sell them on the black market. They're not going to go to the Department of Defense and say, hey, I found this vulnerability, can you give me some money for it? Right? That's just not going to happen. So who here remembers from my keynote when I found this mainframe on the internet? A handful of people? This scared the crap out of me when I found this, by the way. Like, this was terrifying. I went to the HackerOne offices and went up and down the chain and found the person who represents the Department of Defense and confirmed that this was in scope. I made sure, before I did anything else, I made sure that this was in scope for a pen test as part of their bug bounty program. And so, because I was itching to hit Y, right? This whole legalese just says, like, hit yes if you want to continue. And I really wanted to see what was on the next screen. And it turns out this is what's on the next screen. And from here, now if you saw my talk yesterday in the security track, I talked about how I would go from this screen to going from this to getting access to breaking in, and then so on and so forth. I talked about this at a talk in Seattle. In fact, I gave a live demo of this system in Seattle and how I would break in. And the next day, there was someone from the DoD in the audience, and the next day, the system was gone from the internet. Okay?
Progress.
Yeah, but that's the thing. To me, that's a win, right? Like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of disappointed. This, to me, was going to be my lab environment where I can test out fun things. But the reality is, I wanted this offline. I don't want this to be an online system, right? I don't want any of those systems to be online unless they're supposed to be.
So the other side of this coin, if you understand the history where bug bounties came from, if you go back not that many years, what used to happen is if a well-meaning person found a bug, say in Microsoft Windows, and reported it to Microsoft, they generally thanked that person by slapping a cease and desist on them and suing them in court until they basically had nothing left. So who wins in that? Well, Microsoft gets to fix the bug and the lawyers, basically, right? What they realized is, actually, these people are going to, like Phil said, they're going to find these bugs one way or the other. It's the curious nature of the hacker. And frankly, all they want is a little bit of recognition. And so Mozilla, the company that has Firefox, did a bug bounty, and literally all they did was send a person who found bugs a T-shirt and put their name on a list. And everybody was happy about that. He's like, oh, wait, we don't have to spend $500,000 with lawyers. We can just send you a T-shirt? Holy cow, this makes a lot of sense. So Google has taken this idea and basically blown it up. And they said, look, what we're basically doing is declaring a bug bounty. Instead of you all opting in, we're declaring a bug bounty on all the systemically important stuff in the internet infrastructure. And anything is in scope. And they created this Project Zero. Project Zero basically goes out at their leisure, at their whim, at their will. And if they find a massive bug in Windows or a browser or an Apple product or some software, they disclose it responsibly to the vendor, and they give the vendor 90 days to fix it. They don't tell anybody else, they give them 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, they post it publicly. Their research, they post the proofs of concept, everything publicly. Yep. Why do they do that? Because fixing bugs costs money, right? Anybody in here who works for a software company knows you fix bugs, that costs money. Do you make money off that? No. It's like buying life insurance, right? So you got to put all this money into fixing these bugs, and in the best case scenario, nobody ever gets completely owned by using your software. Well, that's not a great market value, right? So Google has found all kinds of bugs. In fact, they found vulnerabilities in everything from Windows to Office, but one of my favorite ones is there's a guy at Google Project Zero by the name of Tavis Ormandy, who by all accounts is absolutely legendary at finding these amazingly obscure and super complicated bugs. And my favorite story is he found a bug in Symantec endpoint protection, your virus protection software that runs on all your Windows, all your Windows laptops or whatever. The software, the irony, right? The software that is meant to protect you from all of these things happening, he found a bug and it was so bad, it's basically an unauthenticated, requires zero user input, remote code execution, wormable bug. All that stuff means is it's really bad. It means that I could just send you an email, and by sending you an email through no fault of your own, through nothing you did, when Symantec virus protection scans that email, I get remote code execution on your machine. It was so bad that when he reported it to Symantec, he kept crashing their inbound mail gateways because they're using the same process, right? He had a very difficult time. They probably had to fax it to him when it was all over with. So this has become the standard, right? I mean, so Google has basically doubled down on the idea of the bug bounty by saying, look, we appreciate this and everybody's doing this, but some of this stuff is just too important for us to wait for you, right? Endpoint protection, the actual Windows operating system, these things are too important to wait for. Which brings me around to where we're at and why we're here, the mainframe. So knowing this, and you guys read the papers, you see the news, you see on social media, you see periodically there's some massive bug that they found in Windows. They found a bug in SMB that had been there since like one of the first iterations of Windows was still there. Are we to believe then that these kinds of things don't exist on the mainframe platform? Well, no, I don't think anybody would say that. But do we hear about it? Well, we don't really hear about them. Ironically, IBM actually is part of BugCrowd, but for some of their other products, and some of the other vendors also have bug bounties, but generally not in the mainframe space. So what is the result of this? And we can argue the value of public disclosure versus non-public disclosure over beers later. It's one of my favorite arguments to have. But what happens in the community as a direct result of the fact that there isn't public disclosure about these things? So has anybody heard of these guys? They recognize this at all? So sometime in January of this year, for those of us who get into like the really nerdy bits of like malware and research and exploits and stuff like this was like, I didn't do anything else for a week except read the dense papers about these things, because what these are bugs partially found by a university and partially found by Google Project Zero that actually exist in the microarchitectures of CPUs, right? So Intel CPUs, ARM CPUs, other CPUs are affected by these things, and the fix is not straightforward. Some of it can be mitigated in the operating system, some of it requires microcode firmware, and some of it just won't be fixed until the next iteration of chip. But when this came out, there was a ton of news about it, right? Intel took it on the chin, ARM, a bunch of other folks. There was code changes that had to be done in Linux and Windows. There was a lot of panic about it, but then the panic kind of subsided because people realized, like, look, it's bad, but it's really not the worst thing. You still have to have code execution to be able to do this, right? Somebody's still got to be able to run code in your box. Shared hosting environments, maybe a little scarier, right? If you're using Amazon or something like that, than if you own all your hardware. But the point I'm trying to make is there was a ton of information out there. We got a ton of information from Intel. We got press releases. We got all kinds of information from the Linux kernel guys. We got patches and information from Windows. So that sort of settles people down a little bit. And then they can make educated decisions about, do I patch? Is it worth the risk based on what the actual vulnerability can do? Meanwhile, I get a call probably once a week or an email forwarded to me where somebody says to me, hey, these CPU bugs, does this work on Z? Is there any chance this works on Z? And I'll say, well, look, the official word is, I don't know, right? If you've got a line in, if you're on the security portal, maybe you've got a little more information than the average bear. But really, there's nothing. There's no public. There's no press releases, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And so what I tell these people is say, look, if you don't know, you just assume that it does, because then you can make your decisions accordingly, right? And maybe it's not the biggest risk you have to deal with. And I got to tell you, if you're still using 8-character passwords and DES as your encryption algorithm, this is not the thing you need to worry about. Right? Yeah. There are a bunch of people in this room who come drive a truck through your system, right, and own it completely 6 ways to Sunday without ever having to go through the sophistication that it takes to write one of these exploits, all right? But the lack of information out there, the lack of discussion about it publicly, what the end of the day, what it really does is it feeds this false sense of security. And we're going to talk more about this as we roll on, but there's a definite false sense of security in the mainframe environment today, and it's propagated by a void of information, because people will fill in that void with what they want, or they'll project into it, hey, everything seems fine, I'm not reading about these things in the paper, so it must be fine. Somebody will take care of me.
So what happens when you have this kind of void, right? What happens when people think the platform is unhackable? I'm not going to get paid for bug bounties. I'm not going to get paid for doing my research in this space. What's going to happen is you're going to turn to companies like Zerodium. This is a company that will buy exploits. They will buy zero-day exploits for all kinds of platforms.
Anonymously.
Yes. They have a whole menu. If you go to their website, you can just scroll down. They're like, oh, we would like an iPhone exploit, please. And people will sell them exploits for money because you might not be part of the bug bounty program. And it's more valuable to them to sell it for $10,000 than have to worry about a lawsuit. Or if you're like us, you get these kind of emails. This is an email that Chad and I both got totally independent of each other, right? Like it wasn't like he emailed me and then I said, oh, go talk to Chad. It was just two separately. I forward this to Chad, be like, have you seen these? He's like, oh, I got the same email. This is a random person using, anybody here use Proton Mail? It's a Switzerland-based email service that encrypts all the emails, so like it's untraceable, it's, theoretically. So this is happening. And this is not happening with just us. Like we're up here telling you that this is happening, but it's happening to a lot of people. And if you're doing security research in this space, I can tell you there's only a handful of players. And there might be people who are doing the research who don't talk to us and who are getting these emails and responding to them.
But ultimately, what it comes back to is this false sense of security. And how that manifests itself inside the enterprise, and I've seen it firsthand, is really poor maintenance and patching hygiene. If you talk to people and say, what are the patch levels you need to have on your system right now, and where are you compared to those patch levels on the mainframe? That was a really difficult question to ask in most organizations. They either don't have the information or they're just woefully behind. I was told one time by IBM that if you are applying the SMPE QM patches quarterly, you're probably in the top 1 to 5, maybe 10% of customers who are patching regularly. A lot of people do it semi-annually, even more annually when they need to by the end of the year, or when there's some major bugs, or they're just applying the hypers when something comes out that's really, really bad that might break. We've seen over and over again that this isn't a way to run an environment, and some of it is created by the fact that there isn't a lot of information about there. And whenever I have this conversation with somebody, they say, yes, but what about the security portal? right? So IBM's got a security portal where they put the information that they don't want to be really publicly available. So you can go get information about APARs and PTFs on their general site, and you don't have to really be anyone to be able to get that information. You have to have a sign-on. But if there's a security integrity fix, they take that problem information, they take that APAR, and they put it over on the security portal. So when you log into the security portal, you can just get a login into the security portal. You actually have to ask your IBM representative. They have to vet you. You have to go back and say, yes, you can have it, and then they give you these credentials where you can then go download the security integrity fixes. When I say download the security integrity fixes, I mean because unlike the SMPE Phone Home, FTP, PIN certificates on both ends, here, the information that they want to make sure doesn't fall into anyone's hands is on a security portal. You have to go and download that information to your Windows PC or a network drive or something, and then you slice it and dice it and then upload it back up to your mainframe again. This is the information they want to make sure they keep really good control of. So, and even then, the information isn't all that great. If you get if there's a nasty 0-day from Microsoft, and there was one not that long ago, that was a remote code execution in remote desktop, unauthenticated bypass, really bad. You generally find out enough information to know that it is in remote desktop, it's unauthenticated, it's remote, and we've seen it in the wild. So that lets you know as an administrator, hey, I better get off my butt and get this fixed. If you get a 9.9 CVSS score PTF for ZOS, it's going to tell you that it's for COM server. Well, how big is COM server? How do you know if you're even impacted by that? Is it worth the risk to apply this? And say, well, running fine, seems to be all right. Nobody's called me and told me I need to put this thing on. How bad can it possibly be?
So we had a question in Jeopardy about ransomware, so I'm super happy that you got the answer to the question, because we're going to have a whole section on ransomware, so hold on. Ransomware, so we talked, it was in Jeopardy, right? So ransomware is, I have write access to your data, I am going to encrypt it with a key, then I'm going to demand that you give me money to get the key back. It is a huge cottage industry now. In the handful of years, so this hasn't been around for a long time, right? Ransomware is sort of new, and it's a $5 billion industry. I think you were, what were you telling me earlier?
$5 billion just happens to be about half of what IBM's global net income was in 2017.
Yeah, so
I'm not saying that they're responsible for all the ransomware. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure they get it from someplace else.
But these
I'm saying it's a big number.
These aren't using crazy exploits. These are people downloading executables and running them, and then this pops up. And this says, all your data has been encrypted. Send bitcoins, send $300 worth of bitcoins to this address. Who here has been who here knows someone that's been impacted by ransomware? No one, yeah? Did they get their key back? Did they get their data back? Oh, they didn't pay. Sometimes you can just throw your computer away and reformat it, and who cares? But what happens when you're an organization that needs that data? Or what happens when you're a hospital and can't do x-rays because you owe $300 to some malware developer? Do you pay then? What if you have 600 machines or 6,000 machines that have been encrypted? What if your entire database has been encrypted by this malware and you're unable to function? Right? So everyone, I assume people have heard of WannaCry. This was a really, really bad piece of ransomware. There's a story, there's a hospital down in LA, where they got caught with ransomware, and once the bad guys found out who it was, they raised the price from $300 to like $1 million. Pay us $1 million and we'll give you back your data. The data's there, right? The data's on the server. It's just been encrypted with a key that they don't have, and they'll never get that data back. And so they paid and got their data back. What's funny about NHS, so I'm gonna try to lighten the mood a little here. So NHS, totally borked because their security was garbage, and they ended up getting WannaCry all over their environment. Now, most enterprises they might pay a consultant outside to run security for them, right? Or have security products running in their environment. And so who here has heard of Sophos? Yeah, okay. So this is one of the favorite things that came out. Now, these graphics are kind of poor because these got changed real quick. This is a screenshot from their website before the WannaCry outbreak. This is a screenshot after the WannaCry outbreak. Right? So not only do you get impacted, so this is the important thing about ransomware, it's a big deal. It's hugely impactful to the point where it forces vendors to change their marketing campaign externally facing because they're getting mocked because they were supposed to protect the security of that company and didn't.
So the inevitability of this is coming back to the mainframe. So our mainframe's ransomware targets. I gave a talk about this at SHARE a year ago. This is the one I referred to as the hugs talk. I talked to our sales guy after this, and I said, you should have been there. He said, why? I said, you could have sold hugs to everybody in that room when we got done with this talk, because you could see the color draining out of their face, like going, oh, God, you're right. That's terrifying. So we talk about ransomware on the mainframe, and what you got to understand is you got to broaden your mind a little bit. We start having these conversations. People say, well, I can't open a PDF on my mainframe. I don't get email on there. How's this going to work? Nah, you're overthinking it, right? Ransomware is super simple. It just reads and writes data and encrypts it. Well, what's a couple of things the mainframe are really good at? I/O. And data encryption, right? I've heard from a lot of people over recently that actually it's super screaming fast at data encryption. So not only would it work, but it would work really well. And if you start thinking about the internal threat as your delivery mechanism, right? The person who just got laid off and is a little bit upset with the company is just writing it and submitting it. Then you don't really have to get too complicated in the delivery mechanism for this, but there certainly are other mechanisms, right? NJE, FTP, SSH, Java exploit, there's all kinds of stuff. But it gets a little bit worse. Because about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit further than that, we sort of realized as a community that in order to keep the level of availability that we wanted on the mainframes, we had to be able to do this over wide geographic areas, right? So post 9/11, we realized that you can't have your systems all in one geographic area. We need to be able to have them spread out, disparate systems. And the mainframe handles this with aplomb, right? You can build a mainframe today with zero unplanned downtime, right? Nobody's paying me to pitch that, but I know that. I've lived that. I've seen it. Right? Zero unplanned downtime if you build this thing right. And how do they achieve that? Well, the guts of that, what makes that really work well is data replication. So data replication is what keeps your mainframe from going down because of some kind of infrastructure problem, power outage, some component failure, geographical disaster. It's because of data replication. That's what keeps it going down. But what happens if you have a data corruption issue? Well, if it's a localized data corruption issue and you're pulling in a batch file and you run a bad batch file, you say, I got tape backup, I can restore that. How does that scale? So if you work for a large enterprise and you think you could recover your system to a reasonable RPO and RTO from tape, I would like to talk to you about this afterwards. Right? People do this with replication. And when I was having this conversation initially, I actually didn't come up with this idea or this concept of ransomware in the mainframe. I got asked by a bunch of C-levels at a large financial institution, said, do you think that it would work? And I said, yeah, it would work. It would work really, really well. And then they started asking me, oh, geez, what about Nonstop, Tandem, and Unisys? And I was like, yeah, you're missing the point. So they're executives, right? So I put together a chart, and I said, look, this is basically what it looks like in terms of the systems I think that you might have that would be susceptible to this. So if you're paying attention here and you're thinking ahead, you might be thinking about like, well, what about pervasive encryption? And the guys, I can just see people in the audience cringe a minute here and go, what kind of a non sequitur is that? How are you changing from ransomware to talking about pervasive encryption? Well, let me just say for a second, and take a breath here, that this is a fantastic solution. IBM have done this absolutely correct. So I ran storage for the bank for a number of years, and having a security background, one of the issues you have as you start taking away administrative access to people so that they can no longer read or change data that they don't need to have access to while still administering the system successfully, you can do that in security, you can do that for systems programmers, but it's nearly impossible to do for people like storage admins because they have to be able to dump those volumes. They have to be able to back them up and restore them to tape, and they have to be able to move them around. And the necessity of doing that means that they can necessarily then read that data or change that data. And they have come up with an absolutely fantastic solution to that basically allows the people who need to be able to read that data and change that data to be able to do that. And the storage administrator types who need to be able to back it up and restore it can do that without having read access or change access to the data if they don't need it. That is magnificent. And everybody's like, what's the but? So the but is, the only difference between ransomware and pervasive encryption is who has the keys, right? I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek just to make Michael Jordan cringe. But the fact of the matter is, what you've done when you do pervasive encryption is you're moving all this risk you have of somebody being able to get at your data, exfiltrate your data, change your data, and you're concentrating all this risk into key management. So if you're going to do pervasive encryption, and I think you should, I absolutely think you should, you need to have your key management game down pat. You need to have multiple recovery and disaster scenarios that you have tested and restored, both on the mainframe infrastructure, but also your key management infrastructure, right? Because, and I've been told I'll never be a marketing person, I'm not sure why, but apparently what encryption does to your data is just destroy it. It destroys it, but it destroys it in a very specific way that you can actually have it back bit for bit, but only if you have those keys. So this is a place, I think, where, unlike the rest of the world, we've had the opportunity to actually set the bar in how this should be done. It needs to be done with a great degree of thought and planning, and most of you are all actually really good at that. I mean, I don't know anybody who's as forthright and smart about planning these things out as people do in the mainframe. But this is absolutely the right thing to do. But you have to consider your key management and the security around that key management as well.
So we talked about sort of current trends, where we're going, right? So that's new stuff that you have to worry about on top of your regular garden variety cybersecurity threats. This is from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. This is a report put together by Verizon and the Secret Service in all the breaches that they see, and a bunch of other data points. And I bring this up specifically because every time I talk at SHARE or at other conferences, and a mainframer comes up and talks to me, they go, insider threat's our biggest risk. Insider threat is the biggest threat we have. But if you look at the number of breaches that happen, 25% are insider threat. 75%, the vast majority, are external threat actors. They aren't people who are inside your organization. They are people who are outside your organization, and it's caused by hacking, but most importantly, because of poor password controls, storage, and weak password security, right? So stolen credentials and people reusing passwords or people using poor passwords. That's the vast majority of breaches. So yeah, we talked about, Spectre, we talked about ransomware, but these are the fundamentals that are still not getting done right. And I can tell you for a fact that I have used these to my advantage in multiple pen tests to break into a mainframe. I can tell you that it works. Now this is where I like to, now that you're all like terrified, I like to ask a quick question. So these are some straw polls. I can kind of see your hands better now if I stand over here. Who here is using two-factor authentication on their mainframe?
Nice.
So nice, good. Who here is using KDF AES on the RACF database? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you don't know. What about TSO password pre-prompt? Okay, 1, 2. Do you know what password? Who put up their hand? Put it up higher. I'm going to call you out for TSO password pre-prompt.
Right here.
Right here. So what does that do?
It gives you the logon ID and the password prompt on two separate screens. And if you get one wrong, it doesn't tell you which one's wrong.
Right. Exactly. So I'm going to repeat the answer. So basically, if you turn that feature on, it asks you for your password, it asks you for your username, and then it asks you for your password. And if either of those are wrong, it just tells you invalid logon. Right now, the current flow, if you don't turn that on, is if I put in a bad username, it says that's a bad username. That user doesn't have access to TSO. So using that information, I can figure out all your usernames. And then I can use poor password security to break into your mainframe environment, right? Okay. So this is the fun part of the talk. right? This is where we get to tell you what you can actually do to make it better, right? To be thought leaders in this space so that we don't have to keep coming up here.
Because we hate this.
Yeah, we do not want to be here.
We've got a media problem. So sometime last year, every single email, social network, every time I opened a web page to read about technology, had a picture of two things, a Z14 and Mike Jordan. And if you didn't see this, you were asleep at the wheel. IBM did an absolutely amazing job rolling out the Z14 on pervasive encryption. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. When I opened up Wired magazine or Engadget and read about IBM's mainframe, it just about bowled me over. I couldn't believe it. But something struck me as I was reading this is that there are still a lot of misconceptions about mainframe, even though we've got like the coolest, fastest, most securable, encryption-ready platform on the planet. You're not far away from headlines like this. What does everybody have against COBOL? Seriously. Anybody who's done it is like, COBOL, right? I mean, seriously. And no one is breaking into COBOL. There are a lot of languages that have a lot of problems. COBOL ain't one. Seriously.
No. Seriously.
They need to get off COBOL, but something about saying COBOL gives people who write these articles like a nice warm fuzzy. They like to dig in on COBOL. So this was an article about the government, the CISO of the U.S. government upgrading their computers, and some of this is hard to read, but I'm going to read a couple of these. It basically said a report by the GAO found that computers in the Defense Department used to operate the nation's nuclear weapons are on 1970s era systems with 8-inch floppy disks. That's true. That should terrify you. But what happens here, and what I started to realize about the time that the Z14 came out, is there is a conflation in the media, right, between systems that are old and neglected and systems that have their roots in the 50s. Right? This is not the same thing, but it is often referred to as the same thing, as we'll see. Several agencies, including the VA and Social Security Administration, have a system that uses a computer language called COBOL, was developed in the 50s and 60s. This is the same article. You don't read articles that say, oh, the Nest thermostat that you have in your house uses a programming language called C that was created in the 70s. Ooh. We all know what the 70s is like. That can't be good, right? You don't see that anymore. I don't know, because it's not as fun to say as COBOL. I'm not sure what that is. And then we say the Treasury Department keeps vital tax records on IBM mainframes that date to 1960. Does that mean that they have a nod back to their System 360 brethren, or does that mean that they're actually that old? You can't tell from reading this. And that's the problem. When they were schlepping at the Z14 everywhere, and you saw it on every web page, every billboard, every TV show, every news station, everywhere, where I really started honing in on this was a Wall Street Journal article where they were reporting it. This is a Z14. It's what a Z14 looks like. I mean, that thing is freaking cool. Look at that. That is really fantastic. Mm-hmm. And that is not the photo that they used in the article. This is. You can't win, right? They are just like, nah, but we've got to show the guy with the ashtray on his desk sitting in the data center. Because that's what people want to see, right? They love to believe this, but it's so wrong. It couldn't be more wrong. Nobody's doing this anymore, and you can't smoke in the data center, which is sad. And that article started out like this, and this is where it finally, the light came on. Mainframes, which date to the 1950s, blah, 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 and recent networks, blah, 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 blah. Can you imagine what would happen if we reported on other new technological advances the way we report on mainframe? So a few of us got together. If you know of Phil and I at all, you know that when we get really upset about something, we do what everybody who's in our shoes do, and that is...
We go to Twitter.
We take to Twitter.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to air something out, man, you take it to Twitter.
Yep.
So I went to Twitter, and a few of the people we are regularly in league with there, including Ross Mari, who joined in on this one. Stephen Dickens, some of you guys might know, jumped in on this too. And we said, what if you reported on technology across the board like you report on mainframes? So here's some of the best. And there's a list of these on the Mainframe Project website that are really funny. Blockchain. which has its logical origins from the Byzantine army of the 7th to the 12th centuries, is now reported to have taken over the world. Internet of Things-based sensor technology can trace its roots back to the first thermostat, which was invented in 1883. And my new Apple Watch, with its origins in 15th century Germany, still tells time. So you ask yourself, why? We don't have anybody to defend it, okay? So there's a group of us in an echo chamber, most of which are in this room, who can defend it. But if I went out on Twitter right now and said, SUSE is the best Linux distribution ever and Red Hat is crap, I would get 1,000 people who would be like, testify, Chad, that is how it is. That is what, you are so right, Red Hat is junk. And another 1,000 people would be like, you are out of your mind. Are you serious right now? Mm-hmm. And then it would just devolve into like nothing but memes and pictures of cats and stuff like that.
It's Twitter.
But if you go out and say something like, ha, 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 oh, they must be working on a mainframe, most everybody will just join in, sort of like, yeah, that's funny, isn't it? Let's kick that mainframe joke because we're unoriginal and we don't understand things. But this is the problem. The issue is we don't have the people, and it's indicative of what a lot of you are talking about, which is like, you know, where are we going to get the pipeline of people to support these things? Where are we going to get the next generation of people to run these mainframes? And I'm not talking about developers, all right? So I'm going to just put that to bed right now. I'm talking about master the mainframe. I'm not talking about COBOL developers, because we have a lot of developers. Mm-hmm. And if you're really good at writing Java code on Linux, you can write Java code on the mainframe. If you can write C code, I promise you can write COBOL, right? So this isn't the problem. The issue is who's going to run this stuff. Who's going to be the systems programmers? Who's going to be the network engineers? Who's going to be the security people who run this thing, who care for it and feed it and understand enough of what's going on in the world today to be able to make intelligent decisions about it? Now, Phil and I are up here because we are gluttons for punishment, and we did all these things on our own. Like Phil said, we found a problem, we fixed it, we put ourselves out there. I'm sure you've all heard of Connor Krusky, right? The 19-year-old kid who bought a mainframe on eBay, right? I think got himself a job at IBM because of it. That was nice work, by the way. That is not scalable, right? I'm here to tell you, if you're from IBM in the room, that does not scale well. And most people don't have $10,000 for a copy of RDT, much less $75,000 for an entry-level mainframe. So I like to tell this as an analogy, as a father talking to his kid coming out of high school and say, hey, look, you graduated from high school, you did a really good job, I'm really proud of you, I'm going to buy you a new car, okay? And I got 10 cars you can pick from, you can go drive them. Well, you can drive 9 of them. The 10th one you can't drive. Actually, we're going to keep it under a box, you can't even look at it. You can't sit in it. I'll tell you about it, it's really good, it's actually the best one. But you can't drive it, you can't put your hands on it. You pick it, you want it, you can have it. You can drive the rest of them. How many people are going to pick that car? The only people who are going to pick that car are people whose dad had one of those cars, or their sister had one of those cars, or their aunt had one of those cars, and they fell in love with that car because they grew up with it. So we may have colleges, and we do have some great universities, Marist and others, who teach this stuff and do a great job, but why would people choose to go there if they don't know about this to begin with? And what about the rest of the universities that are teaching all the holistic discipline of enterprise technology, and where does the mainframe fit in? So we've got to get it in the hands of the people, of the kids coming out of school. We've got to get it into them when they're in colleges. We've got to give them the ability to want this, because once they get their hands on it, man, this stuff is cool. And it's challenging, and it will bring the best and the brightest to bear on it. But if we don't get if they can't get their hands on it, when we all retire, that'll be it. I hope you guys like living in the cloud, because there won't be many people left to run those things for you.
Now,
so
this is a pipeline issue just in general. Right? Like we have an issue finding people. Chad and I work in a niche in cybersecurity. So imagine we have problem finding people to do just mainframes. Now imagine finding people who also like to do hacking. There are about, what, how many people now?
6?
6 in the world?
Yeah, 6, because we won't let Wilson in.
Three, 4 of us in the room right now. So it's a huge problem that we face. And it's one of the things that keeps me up at night is who's going to replace me, right? That's not as, well, I know Chad's going to replace me eventually, but what I mean from a from a who's going to be the next generation of people who will be talking about this and doing security research in this space.
Because the saddest thing that happens after one of these talks, and it won't happen here, but when we go to RSA or Black Hat or one of these other places or do something online, the saddest thing that happens is the wide-eyed kid who comes out of the audience is like, man, this is really cool. I'd love to get in this. How can I? You can't.
Yeah.
You can go to work for a big company, and if you're lucky, maybe you can get your hands on one, and maybe they'll buy you a copy of this software or whatever. Or you could go to this college and roll the dice that you like it when you're done with 4 years and however much debt you accrued, but otherwise you can't. So what's the incentive there? How are they going to do that?
Yeah. I mean, in our case, we just like staying up late and banging away on stuff.
Yeah. It's all pirated software.
Boy. Yeah. So it's not that bad, right? It's not all doom and gloom. But let's be real. You all work for enterprises. You all work for companies that have mainframes, but you also work for companies that have information security departments. That's where I work. I work in an information security team. You work for these organizations that have these people who want to do work on the mainframe. They want to get invited in, but they don't know how. They don't speak the language, which we work on. They don't have tools, which we're trying to fix. But they don't know who to talk to in your organization, and they don't know if they're allowed to even look or talk to the box. There are a whole bunch of proactive steps you can do today, and we'll talk about sort of like a 1 week, 3 month, 6 month plan. But you should be talking to your CISO. If you're in a position where you can go and talk to the CISO and let him know he is responsible for mainframe security. He is responsible for security for the entirety of the enterprise. The mainframe sits under him. Just because mainframe security or IAM, identity management, is run by the mainframe ops group, that doesn't mean that when something happens, it's not going to be their fault, right? But the problem is, if no one's going to own the problem in your organization, it's going to be you who's going to have to own it. Yeah, it's going to be extra responsibilities, right? I mean, that's the reality. Like, look, we did this as extra time. The challenge with meeting with your CISO, so he joked about a chart for C-levels, right? Haha, chart, they need charts. Literally, they need metrics. And the challenges that we've talked about today is metrics are hard to come by. Can I tell a CISO today, there were 36 vulnerabilities on the mainframe in the last quarter. They were all patched within 24 hours, and we are fully patched on this platform. That's the kind of SLAs, that's the kind of metrics that they're getting in Windows and Linux. They don't even know that there are CVEs for this platform most of the time. They don't know that they can do vulnerability scanning. But if there is a breach of a mainframe environment, the CISO will be the one in front of Congress. It's not going to be probably the operations people, right? Because that's who they're going to scapegoat.
I think that one guy at Equifax didn't pass.
Yeah, well, okay, I don't want to talk about that. So, reach out to your InfoSec team. They want to do this work. I can't tell you how many times people come up to us after our talks and say, I would love to do this. They won't even let us look at the mainframe. The mainframe is whitelisted in our vulnerability scanners. The mainframe is untouchable. They won't even let us pen test it. They're worried we're going to break it, right? That's the answer that I get. My problem is, if that's the answer you're getting, then you need to start talking about moving off the platform, because if it can't handle a simple pen test, it's not going to handle hackers who break in and start ransacking your network, right? Better yet, they do it than have an outside party do it. Now, vulnerability scanning, who here does vulnerability scanning on their mainframe? Oh man, really? I asked the same question last time I was up here, and I think there's less hands now. The good news, okay, so here's the bad news about vulnerability scanning on the mainframe. Enterprise solutions still only catch low-hanging fruit, right? They're not going to catch misconfigurations. They're not going to tell you you're not using KVF-AES. They're not going to catch that kind of stuff, which is fine because they catch the low-hanging fruit. Not everyone's going to be like Chatterai, but if they find an unsecured Apache Tomcat server running in your environment, that's something that they know and understand and can use that to break into your mainframe. Now they're in USS. Now they're in Unix System Services. They understand Unix. They will use that to their advantage. Vulnerability scanners will find those issues. Same with penetration tests. I'm still disappointed. So I have calls with companies every once in a while about, oh, we want to get started in penetration testing. And they still get pushback from the mainframe organization about when and how much they're allowed to do and how they're allowed to touch the mainframe and, oh, you can't touch this. And I always ask why. Like, why? What's the major concern? It's like, oh, well, we're worried that you're going to break a third-party vendor product because last time they did this, it broke. I'm like, well, did they fix it? Because I would rather do this during a maintenance window, find the vulnerable vendor program, and fix it, knowing that I don't have to worry about it if an actual attack happens in the environment. So we talked about patching, right? My opinion is not very popular with this crowd, but my opinion has always been security patching is owned by the information security team. It's not on you, and it shouldn't be on you. You shouldn't be making security decisions for the company. That's on the security team. The security team should have access to the security portal and be telling you, this patch goes in today, this patch goes in next week. That's the way it should work. Unfortunately, today, a lot of times in this environment, specifically, patching is not owned, and they don't know that they own it. Like, does your CISO know he owns patching on the mainframe? Right? He might not, or they might not. We had a really good discussion yesterday in the security track about logging and monitoring. About 5 years ago, it was a major concern of mine, logging on the mainframe, getting logs off the mainframe. How do I get security events off the mainframe? And the answer I got was like, well, you do an SMF dump, and then we FTP it off into our SIM. I'm like, well, how often do you do that? And they say, well, we do it once a day. So I'm like, well, that gives me 23 hours and 59 minutes to run around in your environment. I'm like, well, we can't run it any sooner because of system impact, right? That's not the case anymore. The reality is now there are multiple vendor products and tools that exist to get real-time logs off of your mainframe into your SIM environment. That's good, right? The problem is all this data is now in your SIM. Those people are not mainframe experts. They don't need to be because they're looking for events and they're looking for correlation. But they don't have any indicators of compromise for the mainframe. So what are they doing with these logs? They have the logs now, which is great. I'm so happy that it moved from nothing to having logs. But now they need help from you, because you understand the platform better than they do, to help them design, well, what is an indicator of compromise? What in our environment, what data getting touched? Or if someone's trying to access X data sets, that is an indicator that we may have been compromised, or insider threat. That's the kind of information that you need to help them formulate when it comes to logging and monitoring. Eventually, in the maturity model for logging and monitoring, you end up at the end where you have a dashboard and alerts pop up and people say, okay, they click on it. After identifying indicators of compromise is what do you do forensically? But that, I don't even think, that's years down the road. We need to get to the point where we can say, here's the indicator of compromise, here's what you need to look for. Now, I put this slide together because I find after some of my talks, people are like, oh, I don't know what to do. I have no direction. Phil, what should I be doing? Next week, you should really just get an understanding. Where does the information security team fit with the mainframe? What do they own? What do they think they own? What do you think you own? Where, like, sort of where, maybe they think they don't own anything. And you need to figure out, well, we don't own that either. So where are the gaps? Start engaging your team to understand when we're allowed to do vulnerability scanning. When are we going to do pen testing? If we aren't doing real-time logging into the SIM, should we start looking into that? Maybe your information security team is just not ready to do that. They don't even have people who can speak mainframe yet. And then eventually, in the next year or so, you should be doing at least vulnerability scans at a minimum. Right? There's no reason those do not take down mainframes anymore. That's a myth. I don't know who propagated that. I'm sure it happened once in the 90s, but it's 2018 now. It's not a thing that's going to happen. Right? I've seen it. So the whole point of this is we want to move the needle, and we want to keep moving it so that we can keep up with emerging trends. Now, I think hopefully everyone here has been using the app to ask any questions. So I think I hope we have a few questions.
But thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, well, we want to say thank you.
And what a lot of info.
We get questions?
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes or so. First question. I'm pretty sure that I've never heard in the news media any reports of a mainframe data breach like Yahoo, Target, Yahoo Equifax, Yahoo. Why is that?
So, can I do this one? This is my favorite one. So, good news. If you want to come to my session tomorrow, I'm talking about a tool that was released during a mainframe breach in Sweden where the guy stole the entirety of their tax processing source code. He stole all their social security numbers and stole 5,000 euros and then got caught trying to steal 1 million euros. If you look up online a talk I gave at Hacktivity called Hacking the Mainframe, How to Go to Prison, I gave a whole talk about a guy who hacked mainframes, found 0 days, and used that to breach the mainframe and successfully stole data just from one user account.
All right. What are the top 3 most successful hacks of an actual mainframe?
You're going to be really sad about this, but it's like, in terms of techniques, it's like I figured out that it's March in 2018 and that's your password. That's really how it is right now.
Yeah.
In terms of successful attacks, you're talking about actual incidents other than the ones that get publicized. You don't know. So that also kind of winds up into that false sense of security. That you may not be required to disclose a mainframe breach if there wasn't, so you can't prove that customer data was exfiltrated, for instance. So we don't really know. But in terms of techniques, the bad news is they're all relatively simplistic right now.
Okay. What's the one thing you would like to bring to SHARE that you see at DEF CON or Black Hat?
I want them to wheel a mainframe in up on the stage on Sunday, give everybody an account, set up like a working, maybe faux banking system or something on there, and just let folks have at it.
Yeah, I think that would be. Right.
I'd like them to do that at DEF CON too, by the way.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen at DEF CON, but I would be thrilled to see that happen here.
I'll bring mine in.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, sure. You guys, let's work on mine. All right. How many mainframe shops are likely to be easily hackable?
Did you see that red chart?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is a hoodie required to hack a mainframe?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm wearing it underneath the suit, but it's on.
All right.
We sell hoodies for $29.95 if you want to come up. And
How about a 5-day-old beard?
Yes, that's perfect. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
All right, there we go.
Yeah. It's not required, but
It
it is.
wasn't on here. I made that
It
up.
is recommended.
What do you think of MFA?
I think that you should be doing it right now. Why are you still here? Seriously,
Yeah.
I think it is absolutely. That slide that had 80% of breaches are caused by credential reuse. That is not a joke. MFA absolutely eliminates that.
Can you explain to them what MFA is?
Yeah, multi-factor authentication, right? So basically, I have a password, that's what I log into the mainframe with, but I have a key fob or a code generator or something else that basically the second factor, the something I have and the something I know. And what that does is it prevents when I put a keylogger on Mark's computer and I get his user ID and his password as Vegas 75, and now I can reuse that, right? But if I use MFA, then even if I have his password, I can't reuse it. So this is a no-brainer. Now, it's not simple. There's some work that has to be done in terms of analysis to do that. But especially for your senior people, for your sysprogs, for your security administrators, because you don't have to roll it out to everybody. And there's a number of solutions that do it. You should be doing it right now. It's the number one thing you can do to prevent.
At a minimum,
breaches.
your security admins should have MFA enabled. Just
All right.
period.
I'd like to run ZOS at home to help find and report vulnerabilities. Is that possible?
I don't know. Is it? Yeah. So
If you got the money, yeah.
there's
You
a
got the
couple.
money.
There's some non-sustainable options, like you can buy yours on eBay, but to get ZOS on it is a bit of a challenge. You can buy a product called I don't know what they call it these days, ZDT. Which is basically a mainframe hypervisor, the Z architecture hypervisor that runs on Linux, and you get a full copy of the suite, but it's not cheap. If you have a company, you can probably afford it. It's in the thousands of dollars, but as an individual, it's difficult.
All righty. So several years ago, I was at ISSA meeting. I was not. And questioned mainframe hacking. Basically, nobody wanted to talk about it. How do we change the culture and get the non-mainframe folks to realize how important this actually is?
I'm gonna answer this question by asking a question. How many people here have been to DEF CON?
Applause? Anybody?
No one. Well, you don't count. How many? One hand in the back. All right. How about any security conference? And I mean like a hacker conference. I don't mean like...
We'll call RSA. We'll lump RSA.
Yeah, RSA, barely. Only a handful. That's how you start framing it. How many people go to their local security meetups? Their local hacker meetups? 1, 2, 3, 4 people. That's actually a pretty good number. I'm impressed. The reality is, like, look, we have YouTube videos, we have blogs, we have all this stuff. Like, we really try to get people awareness. I like to tell a story. I was at Twitter, and a guy came up to me, and he's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I do mainframe security research for a bank. He's like, oh, cool. Does anybody still use mainframes? And this was an event hosted by Twitter, and this was a person from Twitter. And I told him, I go, look, Twitter goes offline 24 hours. It'll be in the news for about a weekend. By Monday morning, there'll be MySpace 2. We'll have replaced it. Friendster squared. And no one will care, right? It might be in the news about, like, I'll come and buy some of your servers in the bankruptcy sale.
No one will know because they can't get their news off Twitter.
That's true, yeah. No one will know. And there'll be a land grab on MySpace too. But if all the mainframes went offline, it would be a catastrophic event. Paychecks would bounce. People would not have money available to them. There would be runs on the banks around the world. It would be terrifying. And then that person left and never talked to me again. Right? So I think the challenge that I face personally is, look, we're at DEF CON giving talks. We're trying to convince people that you need to care. We have a whole slide, like we have a jokey slide at DEF CON, and it's a picture of all the companies that use a mainframe, right? And it's literally, you can't read the text. It's tiny, tiny text, because we had to fit it all on one slide. And we say, somewhere on this slide is a company you care about. And then we hit the next slide, and it's another slide full of companies. And we say, if they're not on that slide, they're on this slide. To drive the point home that you don't think you need to care about mainframes, but you do. And I think that's the challenge. And if you're at an event and you hear people saying, well, why do I care? I don't need to care about mainframe security. It's like, well, if you bank, you should care about mainframe security. If you fly, you should care about mainframe security. There is more people doing security research on Android phones than there are doing security research on the mainframe. And if there's an Android phone breach, that gets patched in like an hour, right? A whole bunch of phones get patched, and it's a big deal. But if there's a major mainframe vulnerability, I don't know how long it would take the world to patch all the systems.
All right, that was a great way to end it on. How about a nice hand for these guys? Stay where you are.
Thank you.
Very powerful.
Well, thank you.
Great. Couple quick reminders before I let you go. Those questions are all going to be up on, we're going to answer them later on, and they're going to be up on the SHARE site. So any questions we didn't get to. Help us reach that goal of 15,000 completed sessions by filling out the eval at every single on your app. Please, when you get out, do those. Share.org evaluation. See how we're doing by checking out the leaderboard on the screens in the convention center, the mobile app, and under leaderboard. And if you have an overall question or comment, can share that feedback by text and response, instant polls. Thank you. Don't forget to join us tonight's reception at Share Technology Exchange. That's at 5:30 tonight, right downstairs. Expo again opens at 4. I just want to say, out of all the shows I've had in the last year, you guys are the most recent, and I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thanks, you guys. See you in St. Louis, I hope. Great.